Welcome to It's Upgrade Season, the only place to get raw and unfiltered advice on how to get your shit together 1 week at a time. I'm your host, Alexandria, and join me every Monday for The Upgrade and every Friday for The Wind Down, where I'm going to be answering your dilemmas. Small shifts, huge upgrades. Let's fucking do this. Welcome to today's episode, and I am unbelievably excited about today's guest. When I say that she is a part of my everyday life, that's quite creepy, but it's true. I actually use her oracle decks every single day, and the potency of the messages that I get from those cards is just unbelievable. I've actually weaved them into my retreats before as well. The girls on the Mallorca retreat, we did this amazing session teaching them how to read oracle card decks, be their own oracle essentially. And this deck, again, was just so accurate with the messages that came forward for them. So I'm unbelievably excited to welcome Rebecca Campbell onto the Upgrade Season podcast. Rebecca Campbell, if you don't know already, is an international best-selling writer, poet, healer, ritualist, spiritual teacher, visionary, and mystic who has been featured in the most incredible places such as Vogue, The Sunday Times, and Oprah.com. Her books, oracles, courses, and workshops have been translated into over 20 languages, and she has supported hundreds of thousands of people to change their lives and answer the calls of their soul. Rebecca believes that we are nature and that, like nature, we are ever changing. And this is the one things that I'm going to really deep dive with her today, because we're going to be talking all about the idea of rebirth, of shifting, evolving, growing. And let me tell you, I need this episode as much as I need to share it right now, okay? So I might be asking her some pretty personal questions on there as well, because she's got a new book coming out. I was lucky enough to get a sample of this book, and oh my God, it is, I was devouring it, honestly. It's incredible. I can't wait to get a physical copy as well so I can make notes, scribble, fold pages. You know the drill. But Rebecca believes that the soul is always calling us forward every moment of every day, and that if you develop a practice of acting on these whispers, you will find yourself living in flow with the rest of life. She calls this living a soul-led life. I am so excited to have her on. I can't wait for you to get to listen to this conversation. So without further ado, here is Rebecca. Welcome.
Oh.
I am so unbelievably excited to have you here. Thank you for making the trip. I know it's been quite the trip to get here as well.
I know, London trains. No, it's so great. And yeah, I've had it in the diary for a while. I've been really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And honestly, I can be slightly selfish for a minute. Because I saw your Instagram post about the book, and then I was very fortunate to get a bit of an advance preview. And when I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, I need this conversation more than I can tell you. So whilst I know this is going to be a conversation that helps so many people, and the book is going to be, oh my God, I just can't wait to keep devouring. I'm on a very selfish level, very grateful to be here with you. I'm very excited for the conversation we're about to have. So I wanted to begin by, I said before we started recording, I was like, is it weird if I asked you to do this? And you're like, no, it's chill. I was like, please can you read me some of your book? Because the intro is genuinely one of the most powerful, potent pieces of writing I've ever read. It's just so, I'm doing the gesture, so you're going to have to watch on YouTube to see what I'm doing. But it really just like gets to that place where I think so many of us have been, and that has often been, I feel, shrouded in mystery or not talked about, or we want to reject it because we want to talk about the expansion. So would you be open to reading some of the intro to us so we can give everyone context who's listening?
Yep. Let me grab it. Okay. Introduction. And it's just a little bit of it.
Yeah, we'll caveat this. It's even more potent and powerful, but we'll give you a little brief bit.
Who I was when I started writing it is unrecognizable from who I am today. No part of me is the same. Stoked in the initiatory fires of midlife, becoming a mother, a global pandemic, and dark nights of the soul, only the most potent embers remain. Perhaps you've been going through something similar too, navigating the changing seasons of your life and your soul's own darkest nights. Maybe you're there right now in the messy gunk of your own transformation, not quite who you once were and not quite who you'll soon be. In the muddy rubble of your life, in the in-between, half one thing and half the next, your soul scheduled to go deeper than before. The dark nights of the soul is an initiatory period in our spiritual awakening journey that tends to follow the earlier stages of illumination and heightened spiritual experiences that I call the ascent. The dark nights of the soul is the descent. It's the contraction before the expansion.
Oh, gosh. So powerful. And you touch on it in that intro, but I want to ask you about the dark night of the soul.
Oh,
yeah.
First of all, is not one night.
Okay, that's a relief.
The phrase that I ended up writing it, and my the copy editor was like, wait, this doesn't really make sense. And I'm like, no, it is nights. It is definitely nights. And yeah, I think that when we're on a journey of awakening, our whole life is an awakening journey, right? It's not like a one-time thing. Even if we have these spontaneous mystical experiences or awakening experiences, even when they are spontaneous or we get cracked open in some way, it in reality takes a very long time to integrate it, to stabilize it in our system. And yeah, for me, it really began, I had this spontaneous mystical experience that the book begins with, and it took me 7 years to stabilize that energy. And it really changed me right down to my cells. At the same time, so many of us have experienced such great change, like just us collectively going through something like a pandemic has been just huge for me. I know for you as well, our timing's slightly different, but we've recently become mums. I have 2 kids. Talk about transformation and integration. Yeah. And various different things. Even just, I think that we are all going through some kind of collective dark night of the soul right now. I really believe that. And I feel like since I was a teenager, I've been fascinated by the journey of the soul, the mysteries, the awakening process, and learnt so much along the way. But it was really in this period that I've just been in where it was like actually embodying it and integrating it in a way that like I couldn't have possibly understood what it even meant before. And I think for me, becoming a mum has been a big part of that as well. I didn't realize how compartmentalized my life was. I dedicated to living in alignment with the soul and all of that. But even still, like spirituality and my normal life still was like there was some compartmentalization still happening. And becoming a mum, it hurdles you into it. You're forced to find ways to weave the sacred back in. And yeah. I so appreciate you telling me which bit to read out, because I really struggle to describe what this book is about, because it's really deep, and I think it is in response to the changes that we've all been going through. But it's hard to put into words, so I appreciate it.
Do you know, I think that's why you've nailed it, though. I think you have put into words something that is hard to put into words, but I think you have done that. I think if you don't get it, if you don't feel it, I'm going to say actually, maybe you just haven't been through your dark nights of the soul yet, or you've not fully submerged yourself in it, because I think anyone who has been through, I'm going through it still, I think, which is why it spoke to me so deeply. You viscerally feel the words that you share, and you are giving voice to something that I think particularly, and I'm very careful of using blanket terms, because I know you reference other spiritual texts that do talk about the dark nights of the soul and things like this, but I do think there had been a tendency to focus on the kind of love and light and the joy-filled part of expanding the vision. And that was definitely my journey. I was focused a lot on expansion and the vision and this. And then when you feel that dark night of the soul come in, it's quite worrying. You think, did I manifest this? Am I going to be stuck here? This isn't the state I should be in to get to the next place? And what's so beautiful, I think, is you're actually saying, no, this is the place. This is the vehicle. This is the very thing that will take you through to the place, maybe not the place you want to be, but the place that your soul wants you to be.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love that you brought that up, because I think that many people are going through this phase of awakening, and I do see it as a phase of awakening. I think everyone's journey is completely different. So it's like you can't just track it in a linear way, the way it is for you versus me versus everyone. But there are common threads. And what I see happening as well is that at different stages of our journey, there are different tools and different practices and even just different modalities and ways of thinking that serve us at that moment. And it's where we are on our journey. What I see happening a lot is that, but we're never meant to stay in one place. It's the spiral journey.
Yeah.
But what I see happening a lot is that particularly when we enter into the dark nights of the soul, which is really, it's people think the darkness is the end, but it's also the beginning. It's like birth teaches us that, the expansion, contraction. We're constantly doing that. That's literally the law of the earth. It's the law of nature. But I think that when we are experiencing a contraction after an expansion, it's easy for us to feel like, oh, all of that must have been wrong before, and the love and light kind of stuff, which, obviously it's like the naivety of the maiden or the young child or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, no, we need to individuate. We need to really embody not just one pole. And I think that when many of us, particularly with all the polarization that is happening and the division, it's easy to be like, they've got it wrong, they've got it right, I got it wrong, now I've got it right. And I think the confusing thing about the dark night of the soul, and there's this amazing text, which is anonymous actually, no one knows who wrote it, called The Cloud of Unknowing. And it was some of the inspiration for St. John of the Cross, who is one of the mystics who spoke a lot about the dark night of the soul. And it says, and I'm going to use the term God, so if it's a term that resonates with me, but if it doesn't, just replace it with whatever. But it talks about this cloud being in between you and your God, like the beloved that once like you so intimately knew, and all of a sudden it's gone. And for me, what the dark nights of the soul have, the intelligence of them have been as if they've hurtled me more into my body, more into the earth, more into humanity, and urged me to see the sacred that's already here, like all around us, in the plants, the trees, the flowers, in ourselves, in each other as well. And I think that the earlier stages of the spiritual awakening journey, which are amazing, like it's not, there's nothing wrong with them. They're awesome. I would love to live there, of the expansion and the big visions and all of that. I think that is the expansion that creates a space for more of our soul to come in. And then we're met with what's actually there beneath the surface, and what is there when the conditions are safe enough, when we are grounded enough, things come up. And I think this is what the Dark Nights of the Soul is. I wrote all the way through it, so I didn't actually know that the book was about that as I was writing it. Like, it was meant to come out in 2021, and it was meant to be called Returning, because I knew what was really coming through. The writing was really potent. I never really know what my books are about. I know the energy I'm connecting with to write, but I'm receiving it for myself first. And obviously I'm offering it up as well. But I never do my writing process as in, here's what I want to say, and here's the 3 steps and the this and the this. Like it always comes through, and then I live it. But this one just took a lot longer to live.
And do you think that was part of the lesson as well?
Yes, totally.
We want to get through that bit. I love what you said then about it being a journey and this evolution. I think that's really beautiful, because I think it also helps us not reject parts of our previous selves. I know I went through my first dark nights of the soul when I was 27. I had a complete nervous breakdown. I was working in corporate. I literally ended up locked in a room for kind of 2 weeks, just questioning my entire life, my entire existence. But I think there is a tendency to want to then reject that part of you, the part of me maybe previously that wanted to work in corporate and do those things. What I love about the way you shared it is really, we don't want to do that. We want to love and honour that part of ourselves. And even seeing this now part of the journey and that evolution. But I do think we have this tendency to want to rush through it. So if you're in a dark nights of the soul, and I love that, the nights, because it is definitely plural. How do you allow yourself to sit in it? How do you allow yourself to be in that rather than trying to get to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I remember seeing, I actually am going to see after this, I've got an appointment I've got this great functional medicine doctor who came in. I had some autoimmune stuff that I couldn't get to the bottom of. And my friend Binny connected me with this guy, Dr. Bob. And I actually mentioned him in the book, this story. And at the time, I'd experienced through my life a couple of times different Kundalini awakenings. What they are, for anyone who doesn't know, is Kundalini Shakti is essentially like spiritual energy. I see it as like the feminine life force essence. And the most common type of Kundalini awakening is when the Kundalini that's been dormant, the spiritual energy begins moving up, and you might experience symptoms like shaking, you might have heightened visions, you might have bouts of ecstasy, and it's not always a positive experience, but for me, the first time it really was. It was like bliss. It was amazing, although it was disorientating, and I felt really weird because I didn't know anyone who'd been through it. And this wasn't my first awakening, but my first Kundalini awakening was in between 2010, 2011, going into 2012. But after that mystical experience I had in 2017, it triggered within my cells, and both my births, but particularly the first one really triggered it as well, of ancestral trauma, grief, rage, anything around the crimes of the feminine. This did also happen around the same time as lockdown. My home country of Australia shut its borders down. So I had a newborn baby in arms, and I was separate from my support system as well. So it was the perfect storm to bring it up. But I started experiencing the shaking again, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. And I was feeling trying to find what I tend to learn through experience first, like some of us do, and then I discover what's actually happening after it. And anyway, so I went to Dr. Bob, and I was like, because he was prescribing me different herbs and stuff. And so I was like, I just need to tell you this in case maybe something's happening to me medically. I don't know what is happening. I sense what it is. And he looked at me and he said, have you heard of Kundalini Shakti? And I'm like, even when you are in your darkest nights, you are always given just the right little flicker of light to pass you through. And he just looked at me, and we just looked at each other for like probably about a minute, which is a long time to just sit there with someone. And he said to me, what your soul has, if you're experiencing this, it's part of your soul's path. This is just a doctor. Like I didn't expect this to happen. And he said, it definitely is an indication that your soul's scheduled to go deeper than before. And if it is part of your path, and everyone's path is completely unique, then you do have what you need to get through it. And that really helped me because I knew that as a principle again, but having that mirrored back to me was really important in that moment. And so I think when you are really in that moment, the first thing I would say, just acknowledge that things tend to come up when the conditions are safe for you to process them, if that is what is coming up for you. And I think also it is helpful to do things like read other people's experiences of it, beautiful poetry or mystical texts or books or whatever of people who have been through it and gotten through it. I think that is heartening because while it is an inner journey and no one's path is the same, just knowing that other people have navigated it, I think is really helpful. And to really see it being like, this isn't happening to me, this is happening through me. Like life is initiating me right now. And we as a society haven't been taught to embrace the darkness. And when I say darkness, I mean like the winter, the transformation. We know that nothing can be born in the light. It's born in the darkness. We all came from the watery womb of a biological mother, before we entered this world. The womb is the tomb is the womb. And so these are like the ancient mysteries of the earth, of nature. And so I think remembering that is helpful, just in the same way, like with astrology, where it's Mercury retrograde or whatever it is, and it's easy to just be like, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde, it's messing with everything. But if we realize that we're part of nature and then nature is just part of the cosmos, then what's happening with Mercury retrograde is actually happening within us too. And so it's not like we're a victim of it. We're just part of the ever-changing nature of life.
Yeah.
I think things like that help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that because I think it's also taking it from, I see often people like creating labels as well around things like this. Say their star sign becomes like a label rather than seeing it as actually working with.
Yeah.
Rather than maybe something that's working against you at times.
Exactly.
So I love that kind of reframe. I'm really curious on a personal level. You spoke then about the global pandemic. You've had this awakening, first of all, the Kundalini awakening, which you write about in incredible it sounds amazing, but also intense, like incredible in the book. And then you've got the global pandemic, kids, lockdowns, all the rest of it. So you're going through these dark nights of the soul. What does that look like on a practical level? When I think about dark nights of the soul, I want to lock myself in a room and not have to speak to the outside world and not have to, yes, maybe go into nature, but really I just want to retreat. Did you fully retreat? How did you practically navigate that?
At the same time, yeah, global pandemic, you know what that was like, particularly as like I support my family through my work as well. But I love my work too. And interestingly, I found creating and doing my work a relief, to be honest, because I think when you're going through big changes, being able to be held in containers that you know or that you know what to do is helpful. And yeah, it was interesting. And I've spoken to some other peers who have been through their own difficult periods. And I look back at different times in my life, I actually feel like work helps me. And so having that structure was really good.
Yeah.
But then at night I'm working, and then at night I've got my son, and yeah, it was really intense. Like, I'm not going to lie, but I think that time is anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, but if you look at your life, like the things that are triggering you, or that you're finding hard, if you look at them as teachers in themselves. So for example, when I had my son, I'm sure you can relate, where it was just like those cluster feeding nights. Every 20 minutes you're up, and you find yourself like rocking back and forth in the supermarket aisle or whatever, because you're just used to doing it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But I started noticing that when you first become a mum, I don't know if everyone has experienced this, but when they're crying so much and your whole nervous system goes off as well, and you're like, how can I regulate myself? How am I meant to look after this person? And what it did for me, and my mystical experience was about like literally being in the arms of the Great Mother. So perhaps it was a personal connection, or maybe all mums have this experience. I don't know. But I started realizing that, oh my gosh, I don't think I can hold my son just on my own. I need to be held. And at that time with the pandemic particularly, but I think this still exists with mum. Like, I know you live away from your family, for example, so I'm not sure how big your support system is. Mine, particularly because of the pandemic, was not big at all.
Yeah.
But I think generally mums need more holding than they actually have. And so I was like, okay, what can hold me? And I called upon the Great Mother. So I would take Sonny, who's my son, for walks, and I live in Glastonbury. The Chalice Well Gardens are there. And I would walk to this swing, which was like a seat swing, and then I would hold him and feed him, and then I'd be on the swing. This was like a daily ritual I'd do. And I'd imagine the Great Mother or the goddess rocking me. So there are these simple things that come where through necessity. And now there is, and I recorded this, I was doing it for my kids, like this humming track, because when I was traveling, I wanted them to hear me. So there's this, light is just like a hum, like a lullaby that I hum to them to get them to sleep, or if they're distressed or whatever. But then I started listening it for me while I was awake. Yeah. And using it as my alarm. And so it was like Great Mother waking me up, even though it's my voice and my kids' giggles and stuff in the background. Yeah. But then now just this month in my membership, The Sanctuary, the track is called Arms of the Mother, and we just released it on Spotify, actually. Haven't even announced it yet. But yeah, and we started using it as a practice where it's like you take yourself into your own arms, and it's very sweet, but it's really regulating. And so through like the difficulty, there's always something that's being created. But yeah, and to realize that you can't have rebirth without death. And so it's what is dying. Something is always dying within us. We are always changing. The moment we try and cling and keep things the way things are, the out of alignment we become all of a sudden. So yeah.
And what specifically was dying for you in that time?
So many things. The biggest thing was like inherited ways of being, dysregulated nervous system, trying to control things more than...
Hard to relate to that one.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Which I think in a way, like you don't need to become a mum for these lessons, but I think becoming a parent pushes you in to realize that there is absolutely no way you can control this. Because, you watch a child grow, which is like nature growing right before your eyes. And the moment you think you've got it down, whether it's like through a difficult time or a good time, they change.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, or you changed.
You change.
You changed the
God.
Circumstance. Honestly, just before we got to the UK, my son was sleeping 12 hours.
Oh, heaven.
He was putting himself to sleep. I was like, we are crushing
nailed.
parenthood.
Yeah.
And then jet lag, cold, all the things.
Oh my
and
God.
it's just classic.
Yeah.
It's just
It really
hilarious.
is. Yeah.
Cosmic joke.
So exactly. And so then you just have to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I can relate to all of it. I don't normally bring it in at this point, but I do actually just want to bring in a question quickly, because I asked on Instagram about the whole idea of rebirth, because like you said, and I'm curious on this, what do you think's leading to this collective rebirth at the moment? Because I really am feeling it all around me. I've noticed it in previous clients, in friends, in myself, as I said. What do you think?
I think that we're facing ecocide, genocide. We're facing, like, the planet doesn't need us to survive, but we need it.
Yeah.
And I think that us being part of nature, like something needs to change if we are to stay here generations and generations to come. And so I think it's a inner change, and there is an urgency to it.
Yeah.
And I think that I've seen and over again these old ways of being from previous generations. And again, this is not to go, they were wrong, because consciousness was different. This is not about blaming one particular thing.
Yeah.
But it seems to be processing through many of us. And I think it's really difficult to do because, again, at the same time, everything's so polarized.
Yeah.
And so it's wrong, good, bad. And I think that what the dark night of the soul as well really hurdles us into is how life needs to be about holding the two, and to not just see like things as light and dark, good or bad. Things can be two things at once.
Yeah.
And we know that from a spiritual teaching point of view, but actually living it is so different. And I think with social media, I think with us having gone through something as a planet through the pandemic, for example, we are faced with it. Like, we're seeing it all now.
Yeah.
And I think we are waking up to it. But, when you're startled from your sleep, when my son is, oh my God, I don't know if your son does this. Not my daughter does it, but when he does it, he goes into proper, like, hysterical cry sometimes. And that's what some people are experiencing.
Yeah.
Whereas others are gently waking up. Yeah. I think this is happening.
When you say that, I do actually think as well, I think the pandemic, particularly in the very early stages when it felt very mysterious and scary, was facing people with their mortality as well.
Right.
So I think it was a lot of facing your own mortality, but then I think there was that period of introversion that people actually realised they'd been craving in many ways.
Right.
That actually our calendars were too busy and then it was too much. And actually those people we were spending time with, did we actually want to be spending time with them? And that job that was just about manageable because you're out socialising and drinking 3 nights a week. Now you're actually just doing it locked in your apartment. Do you still love it? I think there was a lot of things got forced to the surface. And as you've said already, it's not quick. And I think a lot of that is still working its way out.
Yeah.
And people are still facing those questions and slowly making those decisions from that place. But this was the reflection that I wanted to bring in, because you mentioned control. And one of the things that came up on the responses was struggle most in terms of rebirth, struggle most with the worry and not being in control, struggle with surrendering, resting, staying present and letting go of old versions of me. And I really just want to get your reflections on that from two pieces. I think the first one is, how do we release the control and the grip? I know for me, it feels like this gripping onto this old me and this old identity. But secondly, how do we know when to surrender? Is it always a path of surrender we want to be taking, or is there actually a path of maybe a little bit more pushing or a kind of active energy?
I'm going to go to birth analogies here because it was just the best teacher for me. But I don't know if you learnt this in preparation for your birth, but I remember my midwife saying there'll become a moment where you can't do anything but push. Don't push until then. And I remember in my son's birth, he was my first, it was, oh my God, I had a good birth experience. It was at home in the water and all of that, but it was so intense and it was so painful. And as I was doing it, I remember just looking around at my midwife and just being like, do I push it? What do I do? Do I push it? Do I push it? And I remember that panic state as in I should be doing something. Because you're heading towards something. And she's and then when will you know? And then I knew. But you don't know and then you know. And so for the second birth with my daughter, it was a lot easier for me to trust that. So I think the first thing to realize is that when you're really faced with the unknown in that way, it's like control is like a reflex of safety. So the more you can regulate nervous system, the more you can, when you feel that tendency to control, be curious about it and be like compassionate to you and what part of you is wanting to control or needing to control. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Just be curious about it, compassionate towards yourself. And then being like, okay, cool, what am I clinging to for fear of nothing coming to take its place? Because there's many texts that talk about what you leave empty, grace will fill as well. So, yeah, it's complicated, but I think with control, safety is really important. Analyzing what you are really afraid of here. Yeah. But not beating yourself up as well. I don't know anyone who doesn't have some form of addiction in the sense of that reflex to make yourself feel safe when you don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it, whether it's alcohol or work or relationships or codependence, whatever it is, we've all got something where we might lean back into. The first step with it, if we do want to change it, is to understand it.
Yeah.
Don't make it a bad thing. It's just, it's a coping mechanism that really is protecting you in a way. And then you get to a point where it's just, which would I prefer? Do I want to keep this coping mechanism or do I want to transform through it? But not to be so hard on ourselves to expect like an instantaneous change. Yeah, because often it's learned behaviors as well.
Yeah, I think there's also, I know for me, just a bit where I get sick of my own shit.
Yes.
But I have to get to that point.
Yes.
I have to reach the point of being like, do you know what? I'm actually sick of this.
Yes.
But until that point, I remember seeing it I had a friend once and she was with this, you know, when someone's with someone, you're like, you just know they're not good for them and you're trying to be supportive and stay out of judgment, but you're like, but I know they're just not. And he was just doing the most like awful things. And we knew that she was going to have to break the relationship apart, but she wasn't ready. Yeah, she had to get to the point where she was really sick of his shit to leave. And I do the same with myself. I have to get to that point where I'm like, no, Alex, I'm sick of this shit now. Like, this needs to change. I love that analogy there as well, and you'll know when you need to push, because I think there's also this sense of trust in it as well. This is a slight tangent, but it came up for me. Was your son born in the...
in his water sack. It's called en-call. It's like a French word. I didn't even know it was a thing. It was
so magical,
so bizarre. Because my water just didn't break, and so it was painful. But I was like, I mustn't be in labor because my water hasn't broken. I thought that or you watch the movies and
Yeah, the
expect that
gush.
to happen, which
Yeah.
like is actually quite rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then so the crowning bit for him, it was really painful because he kept on, because of the sac popping in and back, and it was, oh my God, it was so intense. But yeah, and then the midwife was like, he's still in his water sac. And yeah, he came out and he was in the little, like a little octopus.
Oh my God, how incredibly magical.
Yeah. And it's really rare, actually. And my midwife hadn't experienced it. 1 in 80,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so special.
I know.
So what do you do when do you just
Well, you
have to
just
pop it?
open it. Yeah. You open it, but you take your time but they're still, it's like they're still in the womb. And he was still attached to the placenta. And so they say that because when my daughter was born in water as well, we kept her under the water for a minute or so, which makes you go, oh my gosh, can they breathe? But they're still attached to the placenta, so they're still getting everything that they need.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize it, and then I shared it with a couple of people, and they started sending these different stories going, oh my gosh, like in Scotland, this is what it means. In ancient Egypt, they used to take the babies away to be the priests and priestesses. Like it's very, and... Yeah, in Scotland, they keep it's called the caul. They keep it as a form of protection and power. And yeah, it's so interesting. I love all these old myths and yeah.
This is so weird. I actually told someone about that the other day.
Oh my God.
I can't remember why it came up. I think we were just having classic girls. Oh, it was a baby shower, so this probably makes sense. Classic, like, sharing stories. And I remember saying, I swear, and I remember it come from you. It just always stayed with me. Just such a... does feel quite a mythical birth.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And because I'm watching my son grow as well, and he's definitely, he sees spirits, he has big feelings, like he's a big sensitive, and he's showing signs. He will grow and change as he goes on, but he is showing signs of what those myths say, which I didn't think he would because he was such a physical little boy. But yeah, he seems to be like his mum rather than his dad.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. So fascinating. And I can't not ask you about this. I know we've spoken about birth a lot on the portal of birth, but how has becoming a mother, you said you went through so much during the journey and the conception of this book. How has that shifted you on a personal level, but also the way that you approach the world, the way that you move about the world and your work?
Yeah, wow. So I think at first I remember when I had Sonny feeling that kind of the opposites at once, like so much love, but also so much grief. And it's hard to describe what that even is. But I think love brings up anything unlike it. And I also noticed that when he was born, all of a sudden I was so attached to the outcome of this planet. Now, I thought I was before, but just in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And just with, I think becoming a mother for me just awoke something within my heart, like a ferociousness, a rage as well at children who are not protected, what we're doing to the planet. Yeah. And that I think is quite overwhelming for particularly that initiatory period where you're having a couple hours sleep a night maybe.
Yeah.
And so all you can do is focus like this much in front of you. And so in a way your world has gotten like you've expanded into the whole planet, but and I think that does happen in birth as well, like that full expansion. Your whole body expands to start with. It needs to. But then it also contracts at the same time. And yeah, I think that holding those two opposites at once connects you to everything on the planet, but also can make you feel overwhelmed of like, what can I do to respond to this urge, this call, which I think that I just got back from teaching. I did a Rise Sister Rise retreat at the Omega Institute in America. One woman stood up and shared the call that she had, which was essentially like, Great Mother's awakening within me. I want to protect the earth, protect the children of the earth and all this. And she was just like, she was so nervous to say it because she's like, who am I to say it? I don't know how to do it. And almost like it was like she was really up herself by saying it. And I said, stand up if you've also heard that call. every woman stood up. And so I think we are all experiencing this. I think motherhood hurdles you deeper into it, but also makes you feel quite overwhelmed but my hands are full right here.
Yeah.
What is, and I think that my guides have been saying is we each hold a thread for the healing of humanity, and we need to trust the one that we're holding. And because otherwise you can just get so overwhelmed at everything. So it's like, what would love have me do today?
I love that question as well. It keeps it simple. Because when you're trying to work out how to get a shower, never mind save the world.
Oh my God, I know. It's just too much.
Yeah, but I think that coming back to I know that's something that really spoke to me post-baby was actually, and I still do love them, the big activations and rituals, and I still love that. But so much of what supports me best right now is actually very simple.
Yeah.
It's one journal prompt in the morning or just one question that I'll ask with my husband, just very simple. It feels more supportive. And I love the way that you, and I just want to honor this in you, that you speak so much about the planet. I think it is urgent and emerging. And I also think it is something that's awakening within men as well. I know my husband,
Totally.
Yeah, he was very inspired to support the world and the future of the world before we had our son. But since having Leo, just he'll literally cry talking about how much he just wants to make this a better world in terms of the ecosystem and everything that's going on within it. So I just want to say thank you as well for really giving voice to that as well, and supporting other women to give voice to that as well, and being that activator for them. It's really powerful. Something that you mention a lot in the book, or at least the parts that I've managed to devour in the time that I had. And guys, I just want to caveat this, how much I want to devour this book. I do not believe in Kindles. As in, if you love a Kindle, I love that for you. I wish I could be a lover of Kindles. Can't love a Kindle. My husband, the heathen that he is, reads on the iPad.
Oh, yeah, I can't do that either.
I'm like, what are you? I can't, I am a physical book kind of girl.
Me too.
Yeah. However,
it's better for the author as well, by the way.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. I know Waterstones is a chain, but even that, I went into Waterstones yesterday and I bought a massive pile of books, and I thought, I want to support bookstores.
Oh, it's so tricky though, and then you're like, oh, but the planet trees. Yeah.
I know, but I keep my books. I pass them on.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
I don't feel, it doesn't feel like they're never going in the bin. They're always being circulated. And anyway, that's my rant about books. Each to your own. If you love a Kindle, I wish I could as well. But it says something about how much I wanted to devour this book, that I was on my laptop screen. Oh. The worst experience I could imagine. And I was just entranced, like just completely. You really do. I know you speak to the idea of the coming close to yourself, but you're speaking to my soul, and through it was incredible. But I am going to ask you, in the bit that I devoured, you speak a lot about kind of these big experiences, and that actually to fully experience life, we need to navigate being able to experience the big things. And that could, we think about the big good experiences, but also the big quote unquote negative experience or harder experiences that we can go through. And I found this really interesting because something I'm trying to navigate post becoming a mum is actually protecting my peace a lot as well. And I just really wanted to get your take. And this is where I'm getting selfish in the interview, but hopefully it supports everyone else. I really want to get your take on that. How do you protect your peace whilst also remaining open to, because it's not that I want to protect my heart. I feel like I'm Jesus mother had ripped my heart wide open in such a way. But there is also an element of, I have my family in this bubble and I want to protect them and the peace and the family we've created. And there's always going to be things I can't control. But yeah, how do you navigate that push-pull?
The thing is, acknowledging that I think the thing when you've got a big heart and you want to change things and you want to be part of whatever it is, and particularly if you've got ideas and you've got a way to make it happen as well, we have to keep coming back to what's sustainable. A life's work, not a season. And recognizing the season that you're in and what that season is asking of you. And so I think those young years when we have kids, like often a lot of stuff is brought up for us, but for others it's not. And it's just beautiful and joyful. It's like our joy exudes more joy. And you protecting your peace is protecting the peace of your family and then what will go on with that. I like imagining it. I've just created this beautiful artwork. Well, my friend Katie Louise, who is my artist on this new deck I'm working on, it's not out yet. It's next year. It's called Inner Temple, the deck, but yeah, it's not out until like mid next year. But we've created this beautiful piece of artwork. Actually, I used the top of it in the top of the pre-order page for my book. So it's like black and gold, but she's got this kind of like sacred egg around her. And that's what I've been working with myself, like with that, because I so resonate with what you're saying, where it's, okay, I need to fill up that egg. And then that's my sacred space.
Yeah.
And only people that I let enter can enter. Because when you're just overwhelmed of all the things, like you're running on empty.
Yeah.
And so working out what you need, and that can be peace, that can be joy, that can be whatever it is. And then when you want to step outside that, or when you want to do different things, and you totally can, but what's sustainable for you in the season of life that you're in? And like guilt is the worst driver of all.
Yeah.
So it like coming from that place of more plenty than lack, but it's challenging, 100%.
It's interesting as well, like you mentioned work there, but I've also noticed it more in my personal life, like a lot of relationships and dynamics that actually I can't find sustainable and it is exactly what you said there. It doesn't feel sustainable for me actually in this season
And I think this is such an important topic of like friendships ending or shifting or changing, and we don't talk about that.
No.
And I think big relationships ending or changing, like getting divorced, ending a relationship, even leaving a job, all of that, like we have rituals around them, leaving parties, signing papers, even like celebrating or even talking to friends. And if we've ended a relationship like that's acknowledged, like people will be like, oh my God, they're still talking about it. But they'll let you talk about it because it's a thing. People know that it's difficult. But something like a relationship ending or fading or changing, it's not acknowledged.
No.
And it's actually, I think it's, for me personally, friendships ending, especially ones that have ended without clarity, like they've just morphed or someone's ghosted someone because they don't know how to say what's true. I think they are the fuel of so much grief for us. And so I think, just being truthful about where we're at and what is in alignment with that is super important. And I think with relationships in particular, it is challenging. Like I have one that I've been navigating recently, and it's hard not to take it personally or feel guilty. And so then we tend to retreat. Versus, and just the other day I spoke to it, but not as in there's anything wrong about it. It's just like observing, oh my gosh, our relationship's changed quite a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I love you so much.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the change doesn't mean that you are not in support of that person, but
Thank you. I really honour your reflections on that, and I'm really grateful because I do feel like that's another piece of motherhood and rebirth and the identity shift that comes.
It's so true. We just don't have the time anymore.
That's
and
the thing. Yeah.
Also going for dinners, like the reality of that is you need to go for dinners with people who are not going to care if your toddler has a meltdown.
And you're like this with your eyes, half on them, half off them, half
It's so
chasing.
true. It's even my parents are visiting and they were like, let's go on a holiday all together. And I was just like, that's not a holiday. Like they're really good with my kids, but it's just not going to work. I know you've just done it, like all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So we ended up, after it being like them wanting to do it and me being like, I do want to go away, but it's not a holiday.
Yeah.
They went away for a couple of nights, and then my husband and I are going to go for a couple of nights. So it's just 2 adult-only holiday, and then we're at home besides that. Oh, my God, so much better. There's no forcing things to be the same that they were. It's just impossible. Yeah. Which is not to say you can't go out for dinner with friends still.
It's just very different. Yeah. Very different. Honestly, I've adored this conversation. I am so excited to devour more of the book. Can you share with everyone What's the best way to get hold of it? Pre-order, just everything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it's called Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It, How to Be Held by Life When It Feels Like Everything is Falling Apart. And yeah, you can get it. My website for it is rebeccacampbell.me/Your Soul Had a Dream. And it's just wherever you buy books, really. So yeah, and if you do pre-order before end of October, I'm doing a free event on the 31st of October. So you'll get that free ticket too.
Amazing. And we'll put everything in the show notes as well.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's
Thank
been
you.
incredible.
Oh, it's been great.